January wrap-up and February kind of TBR. I'm not really setting much of a TBR for myself. So I read 4 books in January. I'm actually really proud of myself. I started a 5th book, and I'll talk about that whenever it gets to my TBR section. But I read and completed 4 books in the month of January. The first book I read for the biannual bibliothon, and it was the group book. It's the only book that I actually finished during the bibliothon, and that is Soundless by Rochelle Mead. I gave this book a 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. There were a couple of things that I had a little bit of an issue with. One of them is the whole book, there's no talking at all. There's no talking, which I have no issue with because they're deaf. The whole town in this is deaf. The only thing that I didn't like is that while they're talking, there's a couple of times that they say that they make them look them in the eye. And then they sign stuff. And it's like, okay, well, if you're looking them in the eye, how are you supposed to be seeing what they're signing unless they're signing in front of their face? That was my biggest pet peeve about this book. Like, that's the biggest thing that I just couldn't understand. It's like, you can't have people like looking them in the eye and talking to them while they're looking them in the eye whenever they're talking with their hands. That was my biggest thing. That's what put it from a 5-star down to a 4.5 star for me. Other than that, I really liked the Chinese culture that was going on. I liked the folklore that they had in it. Something that nobody talks about whenever they're talking about this book is the town says that they have been cursed by Pixiu, and that is why they're deaf. The Pixiu is what the whole Chinese folklore that is in this book is about, which I looked up the Pixiu, and there's not much about them other than that they're attracted to metals, and this town is a mining town. That's all I'm going to say about that. I don't want to spoil anything, but the town believes that they were cursed by the Pixiu with the deafness. And that doesn't really spoil anything. That's folklore for the history of the town, and they state that pretty early in the book. It's like a little over 200 pages. 266 pages. I don't really want to say much more about this. I know I haven't done a very good job explaining it, but that's all I want to say about it. 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I kind of wish that it had been a little longer because the ending was really rushed. That was another thing that I didn't really care for, was the ending was really rushed. Next, I started reading City of Bones by Cassandra Clare, and I finished reading the first trilogy of the Mortal Instruments series, which I looked up on Cassandra Clare's website because I've heard several different ways of reading this. Some people say to read the first 5 books in the Mortal Instruments, then read the Infernal Devices, then read the 6th book in the Mortal Instruments. And some people say to read them in chronological order from when they were published. But Cassandra Clare on her website, which is the one that I'm going to go off of, pretty much separates it into trilogies. So she says to read the first 3 books in the Mortal Instruments, then read the Infernal Devices, then read the second 3 books in the Mortal Instruments. So that's the order that I'm going to read them in. I just finished reading the first 3 books in the Mortal Instruments. The first one is City of Bones, and this is the beginning of the whole Shadow Hunters and everything. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I went into this knowing hardly anything. I know that there's somebody named Clary and there's somebody named Jace, and I just know names of a few of the characters. And I know that there's Shadow Hunters, and I know that there's demons, and that's all I know. That's all I knew about the books. And I actually believe that that was really good going into it, just knowing that. One thing I will say is I love paranormal books. I love books that have fantasy characters in it, or I guess they call them the paranormal characters, but they're fantasy because they don't really exist. Like warlocks and vampires and werewolves, those are all considered paranormal, but it's like fantasy. It's hard to differentiate, I'm sorry. Anyway, it's got a lot of paranormal stuff in this, which I really enjoyed. And it's very fast paced. I loved the fast pace. And there were a couple of things that I kind of figured out before they happened. One of them is the big reveal that Valentine did towards the end of this book, which if you've read it you know about, and if you haven't read it, it doesn't really spoil anything. I kind of guessed that before it happened, and that's all I really want to say about this one, but 5 out of 5 stars, really loved it. The second book in the Mortal Instruments is City of Ashes, and this is my least favorite book so far. I only gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It had a lot of action in it, but it just fell flat for me. I really liked the fact that we got more of Magnus. I love Magnus Bane, and I really like the fact that we got more of him in this. But other than that, like the action was kind of cool, but it just kind of fell flat for me. So this was my least favorite of the series, but it's still 4 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I read in January was, of course, City of Glass, book 3, and I love this book. This was awesome. There was another huge thing that happened in this book that I figured out way before I was probably supposed to. And I think I actually started figuring it out in book 2. So if Emma from Emma Books is watching, then please hit me up because I would like to talk to somebody about this, or if, I just elbowed the door frame. If anybody else has read these books and they would like to talk about it, please let me know, because I would love to talk about these with somebody who has actually read them and who I don't have to worry about spoilers with. Now on to the book that I started reading at the end of the month. That is Augusta the First by Catherine Kimbrough. It's the saga of the Fenwick women, and this is book 1 in a gothic romance series, and I'm not sure, like, it's kind of slow. I don't know if you can see my bookmark, but I've been reading it for about 3 days now, and I'm on page 88, so it's going really slow. These are books that my mom gave me. Whenever she moved, she gave me a whole bunch of books, and this is one of the series that she gave me. And she's been asking if I've enjoyed it or not, because if I don't want them, then she told me to go ahead and sell them, but she has a house now, so I think she'd want them back. And I believe I'm going to start giving these back to her as I read them, if I continue reading them, because I'm definitely not going to reread them, so I don't want to keep them. One thing I will say is I am about a third of the way through, a little over a third of the way through. It's called a gothic romance. It was written in the 70s, and this is actually written by a guy. This is Catherine Kimbrough is not their actual name. I don't remember what their actual name was. I will make sure to put that in my wrap-up when I actually talk about this. But this is actually written by a guy, and I think I actually prefer that, because there's no heaving bosom or anything in it, which is awesome. I was so worried because I don't read romance. Like, I read paranormal romance because vampires and werewolves, and yeah, there's always insta-love in there, but there's action and there's all this stuff going on, and it has the, like, sexy scenes, but it's not something that is real, I guess, and I don't consider it real because it's paranormal romance, and vampires and werewolves and stuff aren't real, so it's not something you consider real, like insta-love and stuff. But this it's written in the 1700s, first of all, and there's none of the heaving bosom or anything like that, which is really cool, and I'm actually enjoying that part of that. But I'm not sure if I want to continue with the series. I'm going to see how this finishes up I'm going to finish this, but it's so slow. It's so slow. So that's my first TBR pick for February. The next thing that I'm going to read in February after I finish that, because I'm just using that as a little bit of a transition between the Mortal Instruments and the Infernal Devices. So my first book that I'm hoping to read after that is Clockwork Angel, and I'm really looking forward to this. There is bonus content, the original story Magnus's Vow. So I think that's probably one of the stories that are in the Magnus Bane Chronicles, which I already have, so I'm not sure if I'm going to read the bonus content. But it's the prequel to the Mortal Instruments series. I'm planning on reading this trilogy. I'm hoping to get through all of them in February, because that would be awesome. And another thing, I had sent Sierra from Sierra Reads The Princess Bride. I believe I put it in birthday wrapping, so it was birthday present. Sent birthday and Christmas together, and I don't remember which I wrapped for which. I'm bad, I'm sorry. But she said possibly doing a buddy read of The Princess Bride by William Goldman. And Sierra, if you're watching this, just let me know when you'd like to start reading it, because I would love to do a reread. So these are my January wrap-up and my February TBR, and that's all I have for this video, so I will see you next time.